You know, when we think about biblical history, we usually picture this single, straight line of prophets, one after the other. But what if that's not the whole story? Today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating idea from our source material. These hidden communities of faith that were preserving sacred truths, totally separate from the main story we all know. Let's get into it.
So let's just kick things off with a big question. We all know the famous names, right? Abraham, Moses, Isaiah. But what if they weren't the only ones out there? What if there were other groups in totally different parts of the world who also held divine authority and were operating completely parallel to the story we're so familiar with?
And this is the core idea our source material really digs into, the existence of what it calls colonies of prophets. I mean, just imagine these groups of people totally isolated from the main line of Israelite prophets, but still holding on to divine truths and priesthood authority, sometimes for hundreds of years. It's a concept that really makes you look at some of the most familiar Bible stories in a completely new light.
Okay, so for our first case study, let's head out into the land of Midian. This is where the story of Moses crosses paths with one of these very colonies, and where he finds a really crucial and, let's be honest, very unexpected mentor out there in the wilderness.
Okay, so meet Jethro. Now most of us just remember him as Moses' father-in-law, but our source shows us he was so much more than that. He was actually the high priest of this Midianite colony. And get this, he was a descendant of Abraham who held the priesthood. The huge detail here is that it was Jethro who ordained Moses, passing on a spiritual authority his people had carefully preserved for almost 500 years.
So try to picture this. Moses has just led Israel out of Egypt, but the weight of leadership is absolutely crushing him. He's sitting by himself, judging the people from morning unto evening. He's the one and only person they can go to for every little dispute, and the strain is becoming just completely impossible.
And this is where Jethro steps in. He sees exactly what's going on, and he gives Moses some incredibly blunt and wise advice. He tells him, straight up, "The thing that thou doest is not good. Thou wilt surely wear away." That's such a powerful moment of mentorship, and it's coming from a leader who's drawing on generations of preserved wisdom.
And Jethro doesn't just call out the problem, he gives him a brilliant, practical solution. I mean, this four-step plan for delegation is basically a blueprint for setting up a whole system of government. This wasn't just some casual advice. This was a sophisticated organizational strategy born from the wisdom his colony had held onto. And you see this same pattern of preserved, hidden knowledge pop up again in a totally different story.
All right, our next example takes us to one of the most famous stories ever told, the Nativity. But our source asks us to look at the wise men not as just some curious stargazers, but as representatives of something much bigger.
So, from this point of view, the wise men were actually representatives from another one of these hidden colonies, located somewhere way out in the east. Their journey wasn't based on some lucky guess about a new star. It was guided by specific prophetic knowledge that a new star in the heavens would be the sign of the birth of the King of the Jews. And the details here really throw a wrench in our traditional nativity scene, don't they? This timeline shows this was no quick trip. First, they see the star. Then they begin this epic journey. By the time they finally get to Jerusalem, which could have been up to 2 years later, they find the family living in a house, not a stable. So what does all this really tell us? Well, that these guys weren't just astronomers. They understood the star's prophetic meaning. They were righteous men who were worthy of receiving divine guidance. And their long journey, combined with Herod's absolutely horrific decree to kill the children, it all points to a much bigger story, and a distant, incredibly knowledgeable colony of faith.
But, not all of these colonies managed to hold on to their heritage. Our third example is more of a cautionary tale, and it hits really close to home for the patriarch Abraham himself. It's the story of what went wrong in his own city.
Wow. This quote from Abraham is just heartbreaking. He's talking about how his own ancestors, a line that once held the priesthood, had completely turned their backs on their righteousness. They got into idol worship, and, as he says, they utterly refused to listen to him. This wasn't just some problem in society. For Abraham, this was a deep, personal family crisis.
And this just lays out the conflict so clearly. On one side, you have the path his fathers took. They gave up righteousness for idol worship. And on the other side, you've got Abraham, who is actively trying to find and reclaim the priesthood his family had lost. He had to completely reject what they were doing and look to a different branch of the family just to find an undefiled line of authority.
Okay, So this brings us to the big takeaway. In this world of scattered colonies, some thriving like Jethro's, some far away like the wise men's, and some that had completely fallen like his own family's, Abraham is chosen for a unique and absolutely world-changing purpose.
The idea here is that the plan was way bigger than just saving one guy from a fallen colony. The goal was to use Abraham and his descendants to set up a central, visible standard, a rallying standard, for all the righteous people out there, no matter where they were in the world.
And this is the first piece of that incredible promise. Just notice the scale of this. It's not limited to one tribe or one nation. The mission was global from the very beginning. His family was meant to be a blessing for all families of the earth.
And the second promise just builds right on top of that. It's about creating a legacy that will last, a covenant that would make sure God's name would be known on the earth forever. After a time when truth was scattered and broken up into pieces, Abraham was being set up as the central channel for a whole new era. So, thinking about it this way really reframes biblical history. It's not a single line, but more like a complex map of these scattered outposts of belief. And it just leaves us with this fascinating question, doesn't it? If these colonies were real, what other stories, what other righteous groups, and what other hidden histories of faith are still out there, just waiting to be discovered? It's a great reminder that there might be a lot more to the story than we think.